everybody. Hi. Hi. Thank you for being here. My name is Victoria and Reese, and along with Manuel, our tour guide who can't be here this evening, who's down in LA performing with Jasmine and his cool night. I wish them well, of course. But so we are here at Homeschool, free pop-up art school that offers welcoming context to engage with contemporary art and issues, and we're really excited to be here to give her lunch and have a conversation with Nikolai. Should I read your bios and then okay. So if you're curious about our two wonderful participants today, look them up and listen up, because here we go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria, and thanks for hosting me. This has been a really nice couple days so far. I'm really excited that Tabitha is going to join me in conversation after I do a quick reading. There's a wonderful artist here whose work I'm really excited to know about now. Can everybody hear? Is it the traffic? Ish. Yeah, maybe not. I'll try to shout. If you can't hear, say something. I'm just going to read from 15 minutes from the book, which is the only part that doesn't require a lot of preamble. So hopefully everything makes sense, but anything that doesn't, we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards. Okay. The book is called Opal. Once, at a dinner party, Lewis had retold a story he'd read in the New Yorker. The article was an expose on Russian prisons in what was known as the Black Zone, a lawless section of the penitentiary where there was little supervision from above, and the prisoners were basically left to govern themselves. In the Black Zone, rigid customs had developed that newcomers had to learn if they didn't want to get knifed. Most of the customs had originally been created for practical reasons, but by now they'd become arbitrary rules whose only function was to enforce a sense of social cohesion. For example, there was one major taboo against throwing away crusts of moldy bread. Back in the early years of the Black Zone, when food had been scarce, it was necessary to conserve every morsel. Today, a healthy black market supplied champagne and caviar to the inmates, and yet the taboo against wasting bread remained. Throwing away rotten food marked the newcomer as an outsider, someone who didn't understand the history of want and deprivation from which the rules had evolved. With regards to bread, explained Lewis, the culture of the Black Zone was a culture of inclusion via conservation. This was more or less the situation in Lewis and Anya's 6-household eco-settlement, or eco-colony, or colonoscopy, an assortment of experimental architecture clustered 1,000 meters up the side of the burg. There are some pictures of the burg showing on that side of the room. If it gets darker, you'll probably see. The no-waste principle, according to which all inhabitants were responsible for monitoring the internal ecosystems and microclimates of their homes, was enforced by an internalized pressure based on imaginary rules rather than any actual supervision from Finster Corporation above. The tiny red lights of the cameras blinking in every room were a sort of mental reminder of Finster's presence, of the abstract idea of monitoring, but Anya was sure nobody was actually watching. The contract was clear. The only spying being done was by a machine vision algorithm whose job was to spot anomalies and flag worst-case scenarios: tornadoes, fire. This lack of explicit instruction had led to some conundrums. When they'd first moved in, Anya would hike up the mountain each evening with a backpack full of biodegradables and other trash she had accrued throughout the day in order to dump them down the disposal and enter her total net waste into the recycling system. It was her waste wherever she produced it, and she was going to be honest about it. But the surplus of wrappers and crusts and tissues had started to clog the drain unit and overflow the toilet. Anya was wasting way more matter than the house could make go away. Couldn't you throw this stuff away somewhere else? Lewis asked her, scooping chunks of foul-smelling paper pulp from the kitchen drain. He pulled out a long, thick strip of blue and brown paper. What is this, a shopping bag from the mall? I just used it to carry all my other trash in. Jesus, it's not like I was shopping at the mall. He stared at her, dangling the wet strip. You brought home a random bag from a fast fashion store, which you only used to carry your other trash in, and you put it down our drain. Yes, that's what I did. I used the bag. Ergo, it's part of my waste output. I think the waste thing only applies when you're at home on the mountain, Lewis said. No, I don't think it's spatial. It's about what you waste in your whole life as a human consumer. The whole point is to cancel us out completely. She realized she was clasping her hands earnestly. Without meaning to, she glanced up toward where she knew the camera was, nestled above the cabinets. Right, that's what it says on the website, but everyone knows we're just supposed to be making it seem like the house works. We're trying to prove that it's possible to live sustainably and not be such a freak about it, which means not carrying your trash around everywhere. Anya unclasped and reclasped her hands. But throwing waste away in other places is cheating, she said. If the house can't handle all my waste, then the designers didn't do a good job and they should fix it. They obviously did not do a good job, Anya. Nothing in this fucking house works. I'm not going to drag all my trash home every day. It's just not realistic. You want me to save the packaging for my lunch? Where does it stop? Am I supposed to wait to shit until I get home? Wait, why are you eating lunch with disposable packaging? I bought you a lunchbox. Eventually, Lewis's practicality had won out, as it tended to. He was right. Anya couldn't wait to shit until she got home, and she couldn't keep track of everything she used. Trying to do so had led to an ontological breakdown on the micro level of her daily life. Were eyelashes and skin cells on par with hair ties and coffee cups? Were paper coffee cups on par with a mug that had to be rewashed using gray water from the house, which cost energy to pump? She couldn't bring herself to ask the neighbors how they were handling things, convinced that everyone else automatically understood the rules. To reveal her confusion would be to reveal all, including her doubts. That had been only a few months ago, but lately, as more elements of the system were getting clogged or bogged down, the two of them had started to perform exactly the opposite of what Anya had originally done. They carried their trash down the mountain and disposed of it clandestinely in orange trash canisters on the street. At first, Anya felt ashamed marching down the slope with a backpack loaded with a bundle of trash flattened against her laptop. But Lewis reassured her that they were just doing what was expected of them, putting a good, clean face on sustainability. Eventually, bringing trash off the mountain seemed just as responsible as bringing trash onto it once had. Chapter 2. Anya skidded down the slope, which was becoming muddy from overuse by feet. It still hadn't been paved or even scattered with gravel, since Finster didn't want to admit that the state of the pathway could no longer reasonably be called temporary. Rather than upgrade the provisional solution to make it slightly more functional in the interminable interim, it was ignored as a signal that something better, something great, the best possible path, was coming. Lewis likened the situation to a general societal problem. The refusal to improve a non-solution with a makeshift solution, he said, was the attitude that left most of the world a muddy slope in need of repair. Making exactly this argument had in fact consumed a lot of his time in his first year at Basquiat, the NGO where he worked, which he believed was overrun by an ideological insistence on grand solutions that would be forever unattainable instead of small-scale, implementable compromises. Let's be realistic, was his self-parody catchphrase. What can we do right now to make things better? Why do you think refugee camps are never outfitted with proper infrastructure? He'd asked Anya just a few days before he'd been yanked back to the US. They were hiking up the mountainside in the rain toward their apartment, torsos harshly angled against the incline, sneakers slipping in the mud, driving grocery bags. It was pathetic. Muddy scenes of neglect, he shouted downhill at her, intent for some reason on having this discussion right at that moment. The worse things had gotten in the house, the more he'd taken to ranting. The mud is meant as a message that the bad situation isn't going to last forever, no matter how long it's already lasted. They want you to think the camp is temporary so nobody actually has to take responsibility for it. His voice rose as she lagged further behind him. The quality of the now, he yelled over his shoulder, is sacrifice for the ideal. Do you know what I'm saying? Of course she knew what he was saying, but you realize you're comparing the Berg to a refugee camp, right? That had ended the discussion. Today she was carrying only a few avocado peelings in the pockets of her vinyl windbreaker. The whole apartment was a hot, puffy bruise. She didn't dare force anything down the drain. She waved to a group of electricians in blue coveralls who were standing, bored, around a post that was supposed to be supporting one of the vine cables of the cable car. They raised the car onto a stack of wooden pallets. One of the workers dropped a cigarette butt onto the exposed end of a vine cable half buried in mud, and it let off a sorry spark. Unhitching her bike from a post at the bottom of the slope, she saw that Lewis's racer was still locked to a tree. She plugged her phone into the charger between her handlebars, checking it for messages. Damian had already sent out his first weather blast of the day. Dry, 35 degrees, lavender, wet west gust. She checked her phone's weather app for comparison. High of 24 degrees, calm and clear. The gap between the official version and Dom's version, the real version, shouldn't have still bothered her, but it did. She slotted an earbud in each ear and began the long ride up to Prince Lauerberg to Howard's house. It would normally take half an hour, the length of one podcast, but she was lumbering on the pedals today, swinging from side to side with each push. She was exhausted, and true to Dom's forecast, there was a hot wind coming from the west. The sky was purplish with stratified layers of clouds, each like identical faded copies of one another. Add a layer, duplicate this layer, flatten, visible. She listened to the podcast with one part of her brain, thinking with another part about what must have been happening in the lab at that very moment. She was mildly anxious to be missing the morning there. The week before, the simulation she and Michel had been hard-coding for weeks had finally authorized cell culturing. Today would be the first day in at least 2 months that they'd be liberated from their screens, finally doing tiny things with their actual hands in an actual polystyrene dish. It was strange to look forward to an action while knowing already without a doubt how it would unfold. They had seen the routine perform itself again and again in high-definition render. The airtight predictability of the chain of events was the only reason they were allowed to make it happen in a dish at all. She saw the animation in her mind. One cell membrane swelling to accommodate a new blot on its periphery, for one freak moment an egg with 2 yolks. Then, the new blot forcing itself outward to the splitting point, when the edge of the cell would erupt from its boundary to become a whole new edge, scooping remarkably away and burping into its own self-contained shape, from impossible to possible. Plop, said Michel each time they watched the duplication unfold on screen. Plop, plop, plop. She consoled herself with the fact that today wouldn't really be the most important day. It would be tomorrow, when a surface visible to the naked eye would begin to form from all those slow plops. The plops were designed to perform very slowly, growing into a skein of tangible matter. The surface would be translucent at first, shaping itself over the hours into a perfectly symmetrical double wave, like the contour of the roof of a mouth, but impossibly smooth, and so small, conformed perfectly to its given constraints, the shallow dish only 88 millimeters in diameter, the simulated site map of the simulated shelter, the architecture's designated terrain. By the end of the second day, the duplicating cells would have built a delicate little home, rising layer upon parametric layer until it was exactly right, a perfectly circular double-arched roof. Then it would stop. Cartilage in its first official architectural application, a perfect, growable, reproducible, scalable, durable roof, which Finster could send anywhere in the world as a tiny bundle of cells that would sprout on demand. Cells that would be first grown in their lab at Randy. She could already see Michel struggling to repress his excitement. She'd mock him, call him Dr. Evil, but they'd both give in to self-congratulation for a few minutes when the thing was finished growing. This week would offer a release valve from the tedious months plugging variables into a giant data sheet and pretending not to give any fucks about their jobs. On the other hand, they would have to admit to each other with a few uncomfortable glances, the success was a turning point. It made them responsible for what they were doing at Randy. Until now, the eye-rolling and the sarcasm had masked the unease, but soon they'd have to pretend even harder not to care, work even harder not to know where this was all headed. She'd think about that next week once they had accomplished this small exercise in form, a proof of concept that was surely just a small step. The stoplight at Yanovitz Puka gave pause to the pedaling and the imaginary cell growth. A swarm of teenagers in red caps crossed the street, briefly enveloping her. A trio of girls wearing their caps backward, oh pitiful resistance, followed closely behind one another. It was easy to spot the popular girl at the front of the pack right away, simply from the geometry of the flock in motion. What was it about the girl, Anya wondered, the homely girl preoccupied with her phone, that made her the focal point, the yoke at the center of attention? What was the factor upon which the self-replicating algorithm turned, that remarkably consistent geometry of popularity? How had Anya still not figured out the answer, the hidden parametric logic to social arrangements, even after all these years, even as an adult scientist? The light turned yellow, and the group hurried by, ushered forth by a red-shirted chaperone. At the same time, according to a podcast she now zoned back into, jellyfish were taking over the oceans as other species died out in the too warm water and made way for them to proliferate, spreading across the surface in a thick quilt, clogging the gears of power plants and blocking the flow of oxygen to the depths of the sea. Thank you.
Really excited to get to pick your brain about this world that I've been immersed in for the last little while. So you were describing at the beginning about the bird, which is like the sort of like artificial eco colony that these people live in. And I feel like I remember in an early correspondence you mentioned that came from a real hoax that I guess we're seeing some documentation of or renders.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about how you came to like a light on that as your go-to?
Yes, it's a real hoax, like all fiction, I guess. So these are images that an architecture firm called Mila made several years ago. They're fictional proposals for a mountain on the former Tempelhof Airport, which is a sort of like Nazi airport that has had many lives and has been shut down for air travel since about 2001. And it's been left as this gigantic undeveloped public space that now is kind of urban gardens and barbecues and lots of like sort of like weird windsurfing on wheels like activities around the tarmac. And every few years, over decades, the city has said sort of like, what should we do with this? They offer a public competition for architects to propose things. Any number of things have been proposed, condominiums, museums, libraries, but every time the city, the people who live in the city have voted to say, please don't put anything there, leave it undeveloped. So I love this idea, like this proposal for a mountain that would be kind of anti-development, but not nothing. Like the idea of adding, like it would double the city's green space was their main argument. And it would also be like a tourist attraction that was healthy for the environment. And then they kind of like proliferated postcards and images. So it became, if not real, and like embedded in the cultural imaginary of the city. So I stole it and like most things that are just kind of borrowed, and used it as the site of this imaginary eco-settlement where the main characters live.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, totally relating to that. The book is so, originally it said really well observed, but hearing you talk about that, it's like so well researched that you have. It's like,
well copied.
Well, I mean, both are true, and it's all that is totally valid. And so you have so many of these moments in the story that are like these beautiful, flourishing sort of tangents that you go off in that are like observed and either are very real or feel very real. One that stands out to me is like Lewis's like MFA thesis project. It's these like he develops a network of drones that like fly over and they have some algorithm to detect blight, right? And so they can tell through photography or whatever where the blighted areas are, and it like comes full circle that it's like they designate the very university that Lewis attends as like being in need of reinvestment, which feels like so many sort of like, I don't know, self-reinforcing institutional critiques that I see. So that's just like for the sake of outlining an example.
Yeah.
Like
One
with,
tangent.
you have this like amazing like distracted focus, and that's like that example is like one of a bazillion things in there. How do you manage that kind of like focused distraction across all of those things? Like, do you have a way of like skimming the surface and like connecting the dots in a networked way, or do you just totally go down rabbit holes? Like, are you just about nootropics or like cryptocurrency or something for a while? To,
Right.
like, get
I mean, yes, like my life is probably structured as like a bunch of eccentric hobbies. So in that way, like I do probably like have like a penchant for dwelling like that. But I think that's actually one of the trickiest parts of writing anything, especially fiction, where you're allowed to invent anything. So like, why wouldn't you stop? and where should you stop and what should you delete? And I usually say that most of the book was like the work of deleting, because there were, you know, like at least two more of this length of book that just got, you know, over many years cut, because you can't actually, like, the balance of the arc of the story and the tangents has to be really careful, because you can't waste a reader's time, and it's really hard to know what is going to play a part. Like, hopefully there's not like one of these like forays that doesn't at some point kind of cycle back, like the drone thesis, as you say, it's like becomes kind of like an early metaphor for this like built-in institutional critique that then becomes magnified when he starts working for an NGO. So like maybe I would think of them more as like interlocking like prototypes for like the larger arcs, but I do think that like the macro like construction of the story and the micro like stories within it are, I don't know how people do that. Like I would like to, I think when reading for the book, like while writing it and reading, that was one of the things I tried to learn from other authors.
Yeah. Were there, like, I'm really drawn to in those like networked investigations you're talking about. I'm really drawn to like when they cross over between being like art world jargon and tech world jargon. Were there particular like juicy crossovers that you ended up cutting, or like particular points that you want to like, land on as being like definitional in the book?
In the sense of like lingo, like corporate and art lingo.
Yeah, or where those like become sort of like wed in this like unholy function of obscuring capitalism.
Yeah, something I haven't talked about much is like how many things had to actually come out of the book because they were too real. Like this can't leave this room or this network, but there was a corporation that was originally called L'Oreal, which I thought was like very funny to me, to have this like kind of tech company that had started as L'Oreal, but over time, like many things had to be like kind of made more unreal so that they wouldn't infringe, which I think is actually fascinating as a part of the writing process. And there was a lot of like kind of like phrases I had lifted that I needed to modify. The interesting thing is that it's not hard to modify this stuff.
Yeah.
And because it's all just a pool of nonsense, so you can kind of like, it's like a grab bag. And I actually found it really, really interesting to try and write in the mode, say, of a corporate press release, where there's like a piece of journalism at one point in the book, which is kind of like sponsored by the corporation it's intending to like critique. So those sorts of like switching writing gears, I think, helped me like be in that world where the people are using those kinds of terms and just like that rubric for describing the world without maybe, they're just ingested it so much that they're not thinking
about it. So I sort of know from doing their, reading their interviews about you, you're largely using fiction as a way of investigating, like ethical stance or your investigation.
Yes.
Yes. And so I know that you are fairly steeped in the art world, right? Art Forum and Freeze and Eflux and all of these kind of outlets. There's lots of things in the book. Maybe you want to draw us to something in particular where and I like it's one of the things that can. It seems like you hate that at certain like moments in the book, and so the question is, do you in fact do that, or maybe a way to spin it is, what keeps you resilient? What keeps you coming back to the book?
That's a very good question. I have to say I've been veering off more and more lately, so I don't know if there's something keeping me.
Yeah.
I definitely started writing the book while kind of being a committed art writer and really kind of constantly responding to art in review form or in other typical formats, and got really sick of those formats. Wasn't really sure, like it's just like boring to try and like subvert the review. Like it's 600 words, like do a good job kind of thing. And so like, so like the first few years I was an art writer, I was like, I'm gonna reinvent the review, and everyone was like, no, I'm just gonna write a good review, and that's gonna be hard enough. But anyway, so then I was like, okay, there's not a lot of room to breathe here. Like I need to do something else, and so part of the fiction was just kind of a backdoor out of art discourse for me. But then of course, because I was so in it, the backdoor kind of took me back to fiction about a sort of art world. I don't hate the art world more than I hate many things.
Yeah.
I feel ambivalent about it. I just feel deeply ambivalent about art, and I feel deeply ambivalent about Berlin, about a lot of things. And I think that ambivalence, like this like push and pull, like clearly having found a community there, clearly having found like a place to develop my ideas in the art context, but also feeling like continually just like heartbroken by its machinations. I think ambivalence is a really good place actually to start writing something. Yeah,
as a way of like parsing these things right against each other, for sure.
Exactly.
So in talking about your book or conceptualizing it mentally to myself, it reminded me a little bit of like Philip K. Dick. It has this sort of like psychedelic at times, these like waves of weird novel technologies are washing over you. And I remember being in a conversation with another friend of mine who's a writer and saying that I struggled with some of Philip K. Dick's books because the characters are all like wildly unlikable. They're all like really petty game show hosts. And, I don't know, or cops or like these kinds of things. Just cops, just like straight up. And they're like her response to me was like, oh well, it's like good fiction and literature isn't about anyone being likable. Like, that obscures like the possibility of getting at greater truths or something like this. And so like in reading your book, I found myself like really resonating with Anya's like psychic reality. She's like a little paranoid, a little neurotic about like how she's performing in like public spaces, like other people's opinions of her. And in some ways, she's like in her partner's mom dies, and she's like worrying like is he grieving enough, and she wants him to suffer more, but also like worries is he like suffering enough. But so like I'm like into that, I'm into that. Like,
that stuff makes sense to you.
Oh, fully, I'm there. But then I was like I was repulsed by a bit of her like sort of neoliberal like quibbling about like am I recycling right and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how you developed her psychic reality or her profile? Is she like an archetype? Is she a bunch of people all mushed together?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I don't think I knew her until I had already drafted the book. I still don't necessarily know her, but my greatest challenge was to not write myself. So for most of the first parts of writing, I was just trying to write someone who wasn't exactly like me. And maybe more like kind of an uncanny valley of need where like there's enough of a difference that I'm like curious to try and explore that. But of course she is like, well, more or less my age when I was writing it, and like a kind of like permanent expat figure. Like we have some like life structures in common. She's female, I guess. That puts us in the same bucket or something. Women narrators are notoriously accused of being unlikable. Except I guess she's not a narrator, but the story is very much from her perspective. And I was very conscious of like the fact that people probably wouldn't like her. And a lot of people have told me like they hated all of the characters. They're like, I liked the book, but I hated everyone in it. And I do wonder, like, is that a problem?
Right.
I don't know. If you were able to get through it, I don't know. I don't think likability is the goal.
Yeah.
at all. But I do think that it has to be, I guess there are lots of like writing maxims that I thought about a lot. Like every character has to want something, even a glass of water. Every character has to be like fully rendered if they're going to be despicable. And I think probably a lot of the other characters were harder for me to write, like Lewis, who's Anya's partner, because I find it harder to empathize and identify with this like emotionally inept male. So finding the things about him that could be lovable, like that was interesting.
Yeah, that's actually sort of like for Sage's maybe my follow-up question, which is like, who are there characters? Maybe you want to like sketch out some of the cast and like maybe why they're likable on different levels, or identifiable or not identifiable. And I guess I'm wondering like to what extent access to their likability says something about ethics and how to be a good person in this kind of like technical miasma of politics, like.
Well, that is a good question. Like, do you have to be likable if you're saving the world? Like, I don't know. Like, how do you weigh these sorts of behaviors against one another? I do constantly come back to this idea of like, if you're not sort of like properly engaged with the people in your immediate surroundings, as in like working on some level of like emotional labor and trying to empathize with the people who you live with, then like I think that that's like structurally like incompatible with saving the world. And I have like no real good argument for that, except that like I think the kind of solutionism that goes into like Lewis's like saving the world plan, that's something else that happens in the book. He tries to save the world by inventing a drug. That kind of solutionism, it's just like it's not how life works. It's not how relationships work. It's not complex enough, and it's actually very violent. And I think that to have like a kind of like nuanced emotional relationship on a human scale is like the first and the most integral political behavior, actually.
Yeah, totally. I was in reading other people talk. You talk about like people being megalomaniacs a lot. And
it's funny that you mentioned that I say that a lot. I say all the time.
Yeah. Do you want to say why you say that?
I'm one? Yeah. It's because I'm a megalomaniac. I think, writing a novel is kind of like a megalomaniac pursuit, so maybe I was thinking about like hubris while writing. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's because I'm like interested in the idea of like larger than life proposals? Like, I think that might be one reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're synthesizing a lot, so you're dealing with characters who are located in very big systems, and they're trying to like ways to respond to them, and maybe maybe there's something about being alive right now in our like immersion and spectacle that also makes us all feel like megalomaniacs. What you're turning towards doing fiction, I guess, because it makes things maybe more accessible, which in some ways feels almost the opposite to me of like speaking versus speaking really directly to something, hanging this like what might be a very contrived narrative arch on something.
Yeah.
Talk about your kind of pivot to do fiction stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's weird that you would have to invent this whole like skeleton and like substructure and like legitimate like alternate world in order to try and say something very directly about what's happening now. I think partially it's that I didn't know what I wanted to say, and so making a world in which things could happen was like a very productive way for me to actually like try and solve some things or like work them out.
It's almost like automatic writing for this scenario.
Yeah. Once you externalize and displace, then you can do a lot more. Or I felt like I could. I think somehow I found it much more direct in a way because you can also just get away with a lot in fiction that you can't get away with. And that was like the best advice I got while writing was like you can just get away with way more than you think you can. Change tenses, like change continents, like change perspectives. I didn't really do any of those things, but like the vast freedom within once you sort of buy into the idea of a story that hangs together as a narrative in some way or another, then there's just so much room to do stuff there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still think there are things that I like while writing the fiction, I wrote a lot of essays that were based on research that could supported the writing. And I'm thinking about that relationship a lot more. I think it's problematic when you use fiction as an argument to make like a critical argument. By problematic, I mean it's usually a bad book. Like that's not maybe what it's for. It's to like propose or argue a specific case. But I do really believe in making arguments and criticism. I just think that you're probably, or you have a character who's a critic and then you can get away with it.
That's cool knowing that you've done essays about stuff that made it in the book because it feels like that's back to this kind of like detailed flourish.
Yes, I needed a place to deal with it. That wasn't just a tangent.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, it makes the world feel so much more. Does it mean you'll be writing more fiction? Do you have other stuff?
I don't know. I started a new project, but I feel like I don't actually have the like tools to deal with it yet, and that I probably actually need to do a lot more nonfiction writing in the interim to get myself there.
Yeah.
We'll see.
That makes total sense in the context of your process. So as I was reading the book, I had this like rising sense that they're like at the center of the Berg or at the center of Finsterkorp or Basquiat or whatever, that there's this like abject, horrifying thing sort of brewing at the middle, which felt like Cronenberg-y or like Ursula Le Guin's short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, and it was maybe like being keyed, but the general nefarious of things, but also things like the cartilage, engineering, that kind of thing, like held this portentousness. But there wasn't a part where I felt like you verged into full like visceral horror, so which felt, I'm not the writer you are, so it's like that feels really obvious to me. That's like, oh, contrasted with this thing. But I'm wondering how you like walked this in a more sophisticated line between like moments of horror, like knowing you're into like weirdness, weird fiction, that kind of thing. Walking horror, walking the boundary between that, satire, like feeling real, feeling real. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a super good question because I also find this simmering body horror was like kind of my one like really important thing for me to maintain. But I think ultimately like the body horror is in the body of the main character who's a woman, and like what a horror! Like she's like constantly dissociating from herself and having these like physical ailments that she can't quite place where they're coming from. And I think, to me, it was much more about like the everyday body horror of like living in toxic environments and stuff like that, than like any, like again, like the thing that isn't, like the thing you don't see is always scarier, I guess, and the thing that's inside is always scarier. Like the thing that you can't, where cause and effect is missing, that's like where the weird and the scary is. But I think it would have been really fun to go like a little more like wild with the mutations and stuff. Maybe there were probably some mutations that came out.
I mean, it makes sense keeping it as a sort of Damocles, where it's like it's the rash, it's just below the surface.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Okay, this is one of a couple maybe meandering questions that work better on paper than they do verbalized. So
we can also let people ask questions or
I can totally do that. Yeah.
do you want to ask? Well, you piqued my interest. What's your meandering
Okay,
question?
I mean, I got a couple of them. But we don't have to. This meandering question is that there's a thread running through the book that's about like sort of performativity versus authenticity, right? And I think the way that we see authenticity most clearly like evidenced is through someone's ethics, right? And so you have on the one hand Lewis, who is like brought into Basquiat to like inoculate them in terms of like providing in-house institutional critique. This is like something that's covered in a lot of art world stuff, like Claire Bishop and you on, like both write about those just as like off the top of my head examples. And as a company, Basquiat has like private investors that they periodically like audit for ethics violations. And so they have these kind of like purges, which feels very much like part of general just politics, canceling people. So that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, you have a character, Laura, Laura.
Yeah.
Okay, Laura, who, like, you know, once upon a time is this like big black bloc hardcore activist, but is now kind of like drifted away from that and spends her days gambling on the TV show The Bachelor and the outcomes of that as a way of like resisting gentrification. So like, you know, to like pay the bills.
Right. Yes.
Yes. So like knowing that those are these sort of like polar, but I don't like find her any less likable for that like sort of failing of failing.
I find it relatable.
Yeah, it's much
I
more
relate
relatable.
to this. That's just, I mean, partially like, well, just like the Laura character's like sort of former political commitment. Like I guess the collapse of that, like her the collapse of her politics is that she can't really figure out like the utility of like this performative protest that is like probably, you know, within like an incredibly circumscribed space. There's a lot of like horrible infighting within like the leftist sphere that she's part of, and then ultimately like she needs to pay her rent, and like, you know, I guess, and The Bachelor comes in as like besides being an eccentric hobby of mine that I'll talk about as long as she'll let me, is a stand-in for the idea of like the fact that performativity and authenticity are not mutually exclusive. And you can be there for the wrong reasons and end up falling in love anyway, and suddenly like negating your own performativity by this like crazy real experience. And just this idea of like in, I'm trying to think of the exact quote, there's an Elias Canetti book, Crowds in Power, where he talks about like a ceremony in which a cultural group will perform dying to the point that they actually pass out and they'll mimic dying like as this sort of like cathartic exercise until they lose consciousness. And I think about this is the same way The Bachelor works. It's like you perform falling in love until you're like actually there, and then you like, you know, like you perform this thing, and the performance leads to the experience, and the experience justifies the performance, and they're always flipping. And it's not interesting to ask who's there for the right reasons. Like that's not it's beside the point.
Yeah.
And so like, are you at the protest for the right reasons? Is that beside the point? Like, is the point that you got there, even though it was because you were like flirting with someone and wanted to see them? Like, you know, the sort of like, ultimately, I think this idea of like an authentic impulse just totally breaks down when you get to real, like the way that humans really interact with each other.
Yeah.
And just like deconstructing that dichotomy is, I think, pretty important when talking about like results-oriented political movements, for instance. Okay, this was a meandering answer to your question.
That was perfect.
We're also a small group, so we can just like drink wine and talk. We don't have to have like a Q&A. But if anyone has like a question they want to pose to the group, like now is a nice time for that. He has already done a Q&A with me before. So. Yeah.
So like one of the classic critiques of COVID is right in the pillars, and so dystopia kind of gets around that. It's like, okay, shit is broken, humans have it broken. Your book does an interesting line between you find yourself getting bogged down into the utopian aspect of that because you want to write the house much more than you actually let yourself include in the book.
Utopian, like, so as in like writing like an eco house that works and like an eco community that's thriving and like,
Yeah, there's so much like, you have urbanomics and there's some of that finds its way into the book much more deep and be stripped out.
Yeah, it's so actually, yes, I did spend a lot of time trying to figure out like, how would the house work if it really did work. It's more interesting to find, for me to find the dystopia in the utopia and the utopian potential in like a crumbling situation. I just have it didn't even occur to me that there was anything dystopian in this book until I had a draft done. I was like, well, this is, just writing, what's happening in an exaggerated form. And then I got really freaked out by this like categorization of like being a dystopian novel.
Right.
Like
That's like,
I just struggle with those being opposites. I struggle with like the idea of optimism and pessimism not coexisting. It just seems like also often like on what scale are we talking and like whose utopia are we talking about? Like the mountain is a wonderful utopia for all sorts of genetically engineered creatures, but the humans less so. I don't know. I think it was much more. Also, I just found it like much more comic potential in like the failing ambition, I guess, of something like a megalomaniac project such as that. Any other ones?
When is the book set, and how did you think about it? It seems like already in the pages that you read, there's a number of details that locate it pretty particularly in time. How did you think through the way and is it precise?
I never wanted to date it properly, partially because it took me 6 years till publication, so like having dated it in the future would have been a huge mistake. But also, there's just so many things that were like jokes to me that I came up with, that I thought I had come up with, that I realized in the course of researching were not jokes at all and were very much true. And that like the act situation was like way more fucked up and weird than what I had tried to do. So ultimately I tried really hard to set it in a nebulous now where like most of the, like there's smartphones, like more or less like an accessible universe to access for us. With many things like cranked up a little bit, and also, adjacent. I just keep saying it's like adjacent to our reality. It's not propelling forward or backward. Also, because I'm not like particularly. I think if you place it in a direct future moment, it becomes harder to avoid like a predictive capacity where you're expected to be in like coming up with something that might come true. Is like something I can't do and like don't also really want to do. More interested in like a lateral move. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. It's been nice to meet you.
Yay, fresh stuff.
Yeah, have some wine and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's
Thanks,
also
Daniel.
books too.
Bye,
books.
It's a good book.
Thank you for the endorsement.
Yes. Put it on the dust jacket. Good
It's
book.
a good. This one's a good one.
Sessions in memory of
Was someone here? Was anyone hanging out with us?